Welcome, dear friends, to another tale from beyond the hills and through the whispering woods. Tonight, we journey into a world of small adventurers with big hearts, where ancient forests hide secrets and courage is found in the most unexpected places. So, find a comfortable seat, let the crackle of the fire keep you warm, and step with me into the story. The Shard and the Root. The village of Bramblewick had always been small and quiet, tucked between hills that rolled like waves of green and gold. Its people were content with tending gardens, carving trinkets, and baking bread. Yet, as autumn deepened and the evenings grew cooler, word spread of something unusual. The market of 100 lanterns would be returning after many years. No one in Bramblewick could quite explain how the market worked. Some said it appeared only when the stars aligned in a certain way. Others whispered it was built by wandering folk who traveled between realms. Whatever the truth, it was known for one thing. Creatures and travelers of all kinds gathered there, not just hobbitkin but elves, dwarves, river folk, and even tall strangers from lands across the sea. Perrin Oakroot, with his mop of untidy curls and ever-present pack slung across his shoulder, could hardly contain his excitement. He and Bramble, Rowan, and Little Thistle had spent weeks planning. "It'll be different from anything we've seen," Perrin said as they crossed the misty fields toward the forest's edge. Stalls filled with goods from places we've never heard of. Music from instruments we can't name. Maybe even, he lowered his voice, a chance to learn something about the old world before our kind stayed behind in these valleys. Bramble snorted. Or a chance to get fleeced by clever merchants. Mind your coin, Perrin. But even he could not hide the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. They followed the winding path into the forest, where lanterns, dozens at first, then hundreds, hung from branches like floating suns. Their glow shimmered in the mist, and with every step the air filled with the scents of roasting chestnuts, spiced cider, and strange herbs that tickled the nose. The market stretched wide in a clearing shaped almost like a bowl, with torches and lanterns casting light across colorful tents. Elves in silver cloaks bartered with dwarves carrying hammers on their belts. A pair of river folk, sleek and bright-eyed, sang songs while selling pearls strung on thin cords. At one stall, a cloaked merchant displayed stones that seemed to glow faintly from within. Rowan leaned closer. "Look at that crystal, like fire caught in ice." The merchant's smile revealed teeth sharp as pebbles. "A shard from the caverns of Wyren. Hold it close, and you'll never lose your way in darkness." Thistle's eyes widened. She whispered, "Do you think it's real?" "Whether real or not," Bramble muttered, "it'll cost more than we can pay." They moved deeper into the market, dazzled at every turn. Perrin lingered at a dwarven smith stall, running his hand over a small knife etched with runes. Rowan paused to watch an elf play a flute that sounded like birdsong carried on the wind. Thistle darted from booth to booth, tasting every pastry offered, until her pockets bulged with crumbs and sugared nuts. But amidst the wonder, Perrin felt something else, a tug, as though the forest itself hummed under the lantern light, drawing him toward the farthest edge of the clearing. There, half hidden behind tents, stood a stall unlike the others. Its canvas was dark green, stitched with symbols he did not know. A single lantern hung above it, but the flame inside flickered blue. Behind the stall sat a tall figure wrapped in layers of cloth, face hidden beneath a hood. On the table lay only 3 objects: a silver compass, an iron key, and a crystal the size of an apple, faintly glowing as though lit from within. Perrin swallowed. Something about the objects filled him with both excitement and unease. The figure spoke, voice low and steady. "Not all who come to this market seek trinkets. Some seek paths. Tell me, young wanderer, what do you seek?" The market of 100 lanterns was not merely a place to trade. It was alive. Every lantern seemed to hum faintly, its flame dancing not just with fire, but with something older, as if tiny fragments of starlight had been borrowed to illuminate the night. The air shimmered with threads of music, Some carried on wind chimes of glass, others woven into the chants of tall river folk whose voices rippled like running water. The four hobbit-like companions stood in awe. Around them moved creatures they had only heard of in the fireside tales of elders. A pair of stone-skinned dwarves, beards braided with copper, dragging a cart laden with, or that glowed faintly like embers. Elves with hair like silver threads, their cloaks trailing faint sparks that vanished when they touched the grass. A towering stag-headed being, antlers strung with bells, walking gracefully through the crowd while carrying a basket of rare herbs. Even Bramble's usual cynicism faltered. By the roots, he muttered, craning his neck to watch a flock of glowing moths released into the air, each carrying a scrap of paper that fluttered down to eager buyers. I thought these were just travelers' exaggerations. Rowan leaned closer, whispering, "Exaggerations can't play flutes that sing like morning birds." He pointed to an elf in pale robes whose music made the lantern flames bend and sway, as if the fire itself listened. Thistle, wide-eyed, darted toward a baker's stand piled with honey cakes glittering with crystallized petals. She tried one bite and immediately stuffed 3 more in her cloak pocket. "We could live here forever," she mumbled with her mouth full. Perrin, however, felt the pull again, the subtle tug at his chest, like an invisible thread tied to his heart. The market's brilliance faded at its edges, drawing him to the dark green tent at the farthest corner. Its lantern burned not gold, but blue, the flame bending unnaturally against the breeze. "Wait," he said suddenly, stopping the others. "Do you feel that?" Rowan frowned. "Feel what?" "The hum, like the ground itself is calling." Bramble crossed his arms. "That's not the ground calling, Perrin. That's you imagining adventure where there isn't any." Yet when they reached the stall, even Bramble fell silent. The hooded figure behind the table seemed more shadow than flesh. Cloth wrapped its body in many layers, greens, grays, even threads of gold, but no hand or face showed. Only its voice, low and deep, seeped from beneath the hood like wind through ancient stones. On the table lay the 3 objects. The compass was silver, its needle spinning lazily though no magnets or stars were near. Strange symbols circled its edge, neither letters nor numbers, but something older, almost alive. The iron key was rough and heavy, its teeth oddly twisted, like no lock it could fit was meant for ordinary doors. And the crystal pulsed faintly with light, as if something inside it breathed. Its glow shifted from pale blue to green, then to gold, like dawn captured and trapped within. "Not all who come here seek trinkets," the figure said again, louder this time, its voice carrying through the lanterns. "Some seek paths, paths hidden, paths forbidden, paths that change those who walk them." Thistle clutched Rowan's sleeve. "It's talking to us, isn't it?" Rowan swallowed. "I think so." Bramble scowled, though unease edged his voice. "We've gold enough for honey cakes, not for ancient relics." But Perrin stepped closer, almost without thought. "What do they do?" The hood tilted as though studying him. "The compass finds not places, but truths. Hold it, and it will point toward what your heart most truly seeks." The lantern flames flickered. "The key," the figure continued, "unlocks not doors, but barriers. Walls of stone, chains of oath, even bonds unseen. It opens what should not be opened." The mist thickened, and the crystal is not mine to describe. Its light is older than speech. To hold it is to carry a fragment of the world's first dawn. For a moment, silence settled like a blanket. Even the bustling of the market seemed to hush, as though listening. Rowan's voice broke it. "That's impossible. No one can sell things like that." The figure leaned forward. "Impossible? Then why do you stand here, hearts quickening, breath catching? You came for wonder, and now wonder stands before you." Perrin felt his pulse hammering. His friends' faces swam in the lantern light. Rowan uncertain, Thistle trembling with awe, Bramble frowning but clearly shaken. Something in Perrin ached to reach forward, to touch the compass, or the key, or the glowing crystal. But before he could, the figure's hood turned slightly, as though looking past them. Its voice dropped to a murmur. Decide quickly. The market is never still. And there are others who hunt for what lies here. Perrin turned. At the edge of the lanterns, he thought he saw them, tall, dark shapes, moving slowly through the crowd. Not elves, not dwarves, not river folk. Their cloaks were darker than shadow, their steps leaving no sound. His mouth went dry. Who are they? The figure did not answer. The flame in the blue lantern guttered, as though afraid. The lanterns swayed in silence. For the first time since entering the market, Perrin noticed how fragile the light seemed, how small each flame looked against the wide night. The laughter and trading around them dimmed, muffled like sound underwater. The hooded figure's stall felt carved out of time itself, an island in the rush of the world. Perrin's hand hovered above the objects. The compass, Rowan whispered, eyes wide. That's what we need. We never know where to go, and it could lead us, couldn't it? Straight into adventure, or out of danger. Bramble shook his head sharply. Or straight into death. Do you hear yourself? It doesn't point north, it points at your heart. What happens when hearts are foolish? He jabbed a finger at Perrin. Like his. Perrin flushed. Better to follow my heart than to hide in a burrow. Enough. Thistle's voice cracked in the air like a twig snapping. Her small fist trembled. We've dreamt of more than burrows all our lives. Whatever waits in the woods, it's better than rotting away pretending we never wondered. So we choose. Now, the hooded figure remained still, silent but watchful. The crystal's glow shifted, catching Perrin's gaze like a tide pulling at his chest. He wanted it. The warmth, the shimmer that seemed to whisper of dawns he had never seen. But the compass was safer, wasn't it? And the key. What did it mean to open things that shouldn't be opened? Then came the sound. From a far edge of the market, the tall shapes moved closer. No chatter followed them. No greetings, no laughter. Wherever they passed, stalls dimmed their lanterns, vendors drew their goods close. Even elves stepped back into shadows. The crowd parted for them without a word. Dark-pathed ones, an old dwarf hissed nearby, clutching his ember ore tighter. They've come hunting again. Bramble went pale. Hunting for what? The dwarf spat into the dirt. For whatever isn't theirs. The cloaked figures moved like smoke, and as one of them passed under a lantern, Perrin glimpsed what lay beneath. A face stretched too long, eyes pale as frost, lips that didn't move when it breathed. His skin prickled. These were not elves, not men, not anything he knew. Choose, the hooded vendor whispered again, or lose. The decision burned in Perrin's chest. He reached, and his fingers brushed the crystal. Heat flared through him, not burning but bright, as if his heart itself caught sunlight. The glow of the stone spread across the stall, flooding the fabric, spilling over the table, pushing back the dim. For a moment, the dark-pathed figures faltered, shadows thinning like smoke and wind. The hooded vendor exhaled slowly. So chosen, so bound. Rowan hissed, Perrin, what have you done? Perrin stared at the crystal pulsing in his hands. The warmth ran up his arms, through his chest, into his eyes until the world gleamed with edges sharper, colors brighter. I don't know, but it feels alive. The vendor leaned close. Though no face was visible, Perrin felt the weight of its gaze. Guard it well, child, for light draws hunger as surely as it draws hope. Then the figure was gone, cloth folding into the shadows, the blue lantern extinguishing with a soft sigh. The stall stood empty, as though it had never existed, and the dark-pathed ones were nearly upon them. Run, Bramble croaked. The four did not need telling twice. They bolted, weaving through the crowd as lanterns blurred and music twisted into a single, frantic beat. Perrin clutched the crystal tight against his chest, its glow half hidden by his cloak, but still leaking light. Behind them, the tall figures slid forward, gliding faster than their short legs could carry. "Right!" Rowan shouted. Down the spice lane, they skidded past a stall of herbs and jars, nearly toppling a stack of cinnamon bundles. The vendor cursed as they barreled past. Thistle darted ahead, nimble as a hare, while Bramble grunted behind, clutching a half-stolen honey cake even in his panic. The market's 100 lanterns blurred above, but Perrin noticed something strange. The crystal seemed to pulse brighter whenever they turned a certain way, dimmer when they faltered. Was it guiding them or betraying them? They burst out from under the canopy of lanterns into the darker paths beyond. Here the market thinned, replaced by quiet stands of moss and stone, the air cooler, the night thicker. The sound of pursuit grew nearer, the silence of the hunters louder than any footstep. Forest path, Thistle gasped, pointing. Ahead, the trail narrowed between two leaning stones, roots writhing like frozen serpents. Beyond lay the ancient forest, black silhouettes of trees tangled against the sky, their crowns whispering in wind like warnings. "Wait," Bramble tried, but Perrin had already leapt forward, clutching the crystal's glow to his chest as they fled into the dark. And with that step, they left the market of lanterns behind. But the hunters did not stop at its borders. The forest swallowed them whole. Behind, the festival of lanterns dimmed to a faraway flicker, as though it belonged to another world entirely. Ahead, only roots, trunks, and shadows stretched forever. The path wound downward, damp earth soft under their boots, the air heavy with the scent of moss and rain. Above, boughs crossed like woven arms, their leaves whispering with each breath of wind. The deeper they went, the more it seemed as if the forest itself leaned in to watch. "Light," Rowan panted, glancing at Perrin. "Don't hide it, use it." Perrin hesitated. The crystal in his hands pulsed softly like the beat of his heart. When he loosened his cloak, the glow spilled outward. It wasn't harsh like a lantern, nor cold like the moon. It was warm, steady, golden white, flowing over the bark and the stones. And the forest responded. Moss shimmered faintly under its touch. Veins of lichen gleamed silver. Even the gnarled roots seemed to uncurl, shadows easing, as if the light were something they remembered. But the light also gave them away. From behind, the silence thickened. The hunters were still following. Closer now, their shapes barely glimpsed between the trunks, pale faces sliding in and out of view. No footfalls sounded, yet branches bent, leaves shifted, the signs of something gliding relentlessly forward. "Keep moving," Thistle hissed, darting between two towering roots. The path narrowed until it was no more than a trickle of stone steps swallowed by time. Vines hung low, cold and wet against their faces, brushing like fingers that didn't want to let go. Every step deeper brought a weight to their chests, as if the forest itself pressed down. Bramble wheezed. "We should have stayed in the village. We should have." "Bramble, hush." Thistle snapped. Her eyes, bright in the glow, softened a little. "We can't turn back now." The moment Perrin touched that crystal, there was no going back. "I didn't mean to," Perrin muttered, but the crystal pulsed warmly, as if disagreeing. The air shifted. A low sound trembled through the roots, like a groan or a sigh too vast to belong to any one creature. The adventurers froze. Perrin's fingers tightened on the crystal until his knuckles ached. "What was that?" Rowan whispered. Before anyone could answer, the ground itself seemed to stir. From the base of an ancient oak ahead, the roots shifted. They rose, curled, and then shaped themselves into something almost like a doorway. The glow of the crystal spread toward it, answering the call. "No," Bramble said flatly. "No, no, no. We're not walking into trees that move. We don't have a choice." Thistle's voice shook, but her chin stayed high. "If it's opening for us, maybe it's where we're meant to go. The other path leads straight into them." She jerked her head back toward the pale hunters. Their shadows had grown longer, reaching between trunks, sliding closer with every heartbeat. Perrin's chest thudded. His fear battled with something else, a strange certainty blooming in his ribs. The crystal hummed faintly against his palms, brighter whenever he faced the doorway of roots. "It wants us to go," he whispered, "or wants to trap us." Bramble scowled, but his voice shook too. Another groan rolled through the forest. The root doorway widened, dark inside but lined with a faint silver glow, like starlight caught in bark. Beyond it, shapes hinted at open space. Hollow chambers, perhaps, or tunnels carved into the heart of the oak. The hunters drew closer. Perrin glimpsed one of their faces clearly this time. Skin stretched thin as parchment, eyes like frozen glass, mouth unmoving yet breathing a soundless hunger. A pale hand reached forward, fingers long as twigs. Perrin acted before thought could stop him. He ran into the root doorway. The others cried out, then followed, Bramble last of all, muttering curses under his breath. The roots shivered as they passed, folding back into place behind them. The sound sealed them in, a heavy, living thud that echoed like the closing of a gate. Darkness pressed in. Only the crystal's glow kept it at bay, golden light spilling across bark that curved like walls, smooth as polished stone. The space was vast, far larger inside than the trees outside should allow. Passages wound upward and downward, twisting like veins, lined with tiny lights, fungi, insects, or perhaps something stranger. Rowan whistled softly. By the old songs, this isn't just a tree. It's a whole world inside one. Bramble slumped against a root. "We're going to die in here." "No," Thistle said, though her hands trembled. "Not if we listen. Not if we trust the forest." "Look," she pointed. Ahead, where 3 tunnels met, the moss glowed brighter, as if lit from within. The crystal in Perrin's hands pulsed in time with it, a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. "It's leading us somewhere," Perrin murmured. Bramble groaned, but no one argued. The sound of the hunters outside had gone silent, but somehow Perrin knew they had not given up. They would wait. So, with nothing but the crystal's glow and their pounding hearts, the 4 friends stepped deeper into the living veins of the ancient oak. And behind them, faint as a whisper, the roots trembled with something vast and unseen, as though the forest itself had begun to wake. The tunnels breathed. That was the first thing Perrin noticed as they moved deeper. The walls of the oak were alive, pulsing faintly, not in a way that crushed or threatened, but like the rise and fall of a sleeping giant's chest. With every breath, the air shifted, cool and damp, carrying scents of earth, resin, and something older than language. The glow from the crystal reached farther now, joining with faint veins of light threaded through the roots. Sometimes the moss itself flickered softly, casting ripples like reflections on water. Perrin wondered if the forest was showing them the way, or merely watching. "Are we inside a spirit?" Rowan asked suddenly. His voice echoed along the roots, smaller than he intended. "Don't say that," Bramble muttered. "Don't even think it." Thistle slowed, her hand brushing the living wall. "Whatever this is," she said softly, "it's not cruel. Not yet. If it wanted to crush us, it could have." The others fell silent at that. They descended a spiral of wooden steps, naturally shaped, as though carved by centuries of water. The air grew cooler, the glow richer. Then the tunnel widened into a chamber so vast it stole their breath. The hollow hall. It was shaped like a cathedral of roots. Pillars thicker than towers rose into the unseen dark, their bark etched with spiraling grooves that caught the light. Between them, pools of still water reflected the moss glow, making the chamber look twice as endless. Tiny motes of light drifted lazily in the air, like fireflies without wings. And in the center, half submerged in one of the pools, was a shape. It was not like the hunters. It was not pale or thin. It was immense, yet still somehow part of the forest. A creature shaped of bark and stone, its body grown into the curve of the hall. At first, Perrin thought it was just another root formation, but then it moved. Eyes opened. They glowed faintly green, like moss catching starlight. The creature lifted its head, water streaming off its bark skin, and the chamber trembled with the sound of its rising. Its face was rough as carved wood, its mouth a line hidden beneath moss. Rowan stumbled back. By the first dawn, it's a guardian, Thistle breathed. Off filled her eyes. An oak sentinel. I thought they were only stories. The sentinel did not speak, not with words. Its voice rolled through their bones, a resonance like wind groaning through caverns. Why do small feet walk the roots of the heartwood? The four froze. Even Bramble forgot to mutter. Perrin swallowed hard, the crystal hot in his hands. We didn't mean to trespass, he said, his voice shaking. We were chased. The forest let us in. The sentinel's glowing eyes shifted toward the crystal. That is no trinket of yours. It belongs to the heart. Perrin lowered his gaze. I didn't steal it. It chose me. For a long moment, silence. Then the sentinel leaned forward, its weight shaking droplets from the ceiling. If the heart chose you, then you bear its burden. You carry light into shadow. But know this, with each step, you wake what slumbers. Not all will greet you kindly. The words rumbled through the chamber until they became part of the roots themselves. The friends exchanged quick glances, a mixture of fear and wonder. Does that mean we're meant to keep going? Thistle asked softly. The sentinel did not answer directly. Instead, it reached one massive hand into the pool and lifted something from the depths. Water streamed down its bark arm as it revealed a shard of stone, etched with runes that shimmered faintly gold. It placed the shard before them, the ground shaking at its touch. Take this. It will open what must be opened. But beware, once opened, not all doors may close again. Rowan reached for it, his hands trembling, but Perrin stopped him. The crystal in his grasp pulsed insistently, as though urging him forward. So Perrin stepped up and accepted the shard, its weight heavier than it looked. The runes flared briefly, then sank into a steady glow. The sentinel's eyes dimmed, its form already sinking back into stillness. Go deeper, bearers of light. The heart waits. With that, it stilled completely, once more resembling nothing more than a shape of root and stone. The chamber quieted, as though holding its breath. Bramble finally exhaled a long, shaky groan. I vote we go back. Right now, before anything else wakes up. But no one moved toward retreat. Perrin's hand tightened on the shard, and the crystal glowed brighter, as if two parts of a greater whole had just been joined. Somewhere deeper in the tunnels, faint and distant, a new sound rose. Not the groan of roots, not the whisper of moss. A drumbeat, low and steady, like footsteps, like war. The friends looked at one another. Their adventure was no longer theirs to abandon. The forest had marked them. They had crossed into a story far older than their kind, and the next step would carry them toward its heart. The sound grew stronger as they pressed on. At first, it was faint, like a distant heartbeat. But as the four followed the winding tunnels deeper, it thickened into a steady rhythm that echoed off the roots. Perrin gripped the shard tighter, its runes flickering with each pulse. He realized uneasily that the stone was resonating with the sound, humming faintly in his hand. The air cooled, dampness curling around their ankles. Soon, the root walls gave way to stone. The passage descended sharply, and before long they could hear more than drums. They could hear water. It was not the trickle of a brook. It was a roar. They emerged onto a ledge that overlooked a cavern vast enough to swallow their entire village. A river thundered through the middle of it, wide and furious, its black waters frothing with foam. It surged from some unseen spring in the dark and vanished into a fissure far beyond. Mist hung thick in the air, broken by shafts of light that cut down from cracks in the ceiling like golden spears. Rowan let out a low whistle. Well, that's not a bridge and stroll situation. Bramble shook his head, scowling. We've come too far. This is madness. We're not meant to be here. Yet here we are, Thistle said quietly, her eyes reflecting the glow of the water. She leaned forward, listening. Do you hear that? Beneath the roar, at first, Perrin thought it was just the river. But then he caught it too. Voices, low, melodic, chanting carried on the current. From a mist, shadows began to move. Figures emerged along the far bank, their forms tall and slender, cloaked in woven moss and reed. Their eyes glowed faintly blue in the dimness, their skin pale as moonlight. They were not elves, not as the old stories told them, but something older still, riverkin, bound to the water's flow. One of them stepped forward, staff in hand, the river curling at its feet as though obeying command. Its voice rolled across the water, deep and fluid. Who walks the root ways with the heart shard? The friends froze. Perrin felt the shard burn faintly in his hand. He took a step forward, throat dry. We mean no harm. The forest led us here. The sentinel gave us this. He held the shard up, the runes casting a golden shimmer across the cavern. The riverkin murmured among themselves, the sound like water flowing over stone. The leader raised its hand, and the river surged. The current bent inward, drawing together, and slowly, impossibly, a bridge formed. It was not wood or stone, but water hardened into glass, gleaming beneath the mist. If the sentinel has marked you, the leader intoned, then the river shall test you. Cross and prove your worth. But know this, the current spares no one who falters. Rowan muttered under his breath, lovely, just lovely. Perrin's stomach twisted, but the crystal pulsed, urging him forward. He took the first step onto the bridge. It shuddered beneath his foot, liquid yet solid, slick as ice. The river thundered just beneath, eager to devour. Thistle followed close behind, her hand steadying his shoulder. Rowan groaned, but stepped after them. Bramble lingered, muttering curses, before finally stomping onto the shimmering surface. Halfway across, the drums returned, not from the riverkin, from the darkness above. Shapes moved in the cavern's high shadows, hulking, twisted forms that clung to the stone ceiling like monstrous bats. Their eyes gleamed red, their limbs long and spined. With a shriek, one leapt, plunging toward the bridge. Perrin barely had time to raise the shard before it struck. The runes blazed gold, a shield of light bursting outward. The creature hit it with a screech, rebounded, and plunged into the river, which swallowed it whole with a hiss of foam. But more were coming. Keep moving, Thistle cried, her voice sharp over the roar. They ran, the bridge trembling beneath them, water splashing at their heels. Rowan swung his sword as one creature lunged, slicing across its arm and sending it spiraling into the current. Bramble hurled a stone he'd snatched from the ledge, striking another in the face and buying them precious seconds. The leader of the riverkin raised its staff, chanting in a voice that boomed like thunder. The river surged, sending up walls of water that smashed into the creatures, knocking them from the ceiling like leaves in a storm. But still, the beast kept coming, shrieking and clawing. Perrin could feel the shard burning hotter, guiding his steps, pulling him toward the far bank. His breath came ragged, his heart hammering with each step. The bridge shook violently, cracks of water splintering beneath their feet. At last, feet on solid ground. The riverkin surrounded them, their glowing eyes sharp with judgment. The leader studied the shard, then bowed its head. The river has seen your courage. You may pass, but beyond lies the veil, where roots and shadows entwine. Few who enter their return unchanged. The friends exchanged weary, trembling glances. They were bruised, breathless, their clothes soaked in mist. But the crystal still pulsed in Perrin's hand, and the shard glowed steady in his grasp. They had crossed the river. And ahead, in the mist beyond, the real trial waited. The mist hung heavy as they stepped off the watery bridge and onto the cavern floor. Every breath tasted damp, laced with the mineral tang of deep stone. Perrin tightened his grip on the shard, which had cooled but still glimmered faintly. The riverkin faded back into the mist, their glowing eyes the last thing to vanish, leaving the four alone again. A narrow passage stretched ahead, framed by pillars of stone twisted with ancient roots. The roots throbbed faintly with light, like veins carrying some hidden lifeblood. "The veil," Rowan muttered, "doesn't exactly scream welcome. Maybe it whispers it," Thistle said softly, brushing her hand along a root. It pulsed faintly under her touch. "Alive. This whole place is alive." "Alive, yes," Bramble grumbled, "but whether it likes us or not is another question." Still, they pressed forward. The air grew warmer as they entered, the tunnel opening into a vast chamber unlike anything they had seen. Enormous roots coiled down from above, some thicker than cottages, intertwining in knots so dense they formed bridges and arches. Moss hung like curtains, glowing faintly blue-green, casting the entire chamber in a dreamlike twilight. Water dripped steadily from unseen heights, each drop echoing like a bell. Perrin's breath caught. It's like walking inside the heart of the forest. But as they ventured deeper, the air shifted. It grew strange. Sounds twisted in ways they shouldn't. The drip of water echoed like voices. The moss light flickered, bending shadows into shapes that moved when the friends stood still. Then came a first test. Perrin spotted it before the others. A gap in the roots ahead. At first, it looked like just another passage. But the longer he stared, the more it seemed to stretch, pulling wider, beckoning. He felt it tug at his chest, a gentle but insistent pull, as though something inside him longed to step through. "Do you see that?" he whispered. Thistle frowned. "See what?" "The path," Perrin pointed, but even as he spoke, the gap shimmered. Shapes appeared within, rolling fields, a small cottage, sunlight spilling over a garden. His heart lurched. It was his home, but more than that, it was the home he wished for. His father strong and laughing, his mother humming as she set bread on the table, no shadow of sickness or grief. His feet began to move. "Perrin!" Rowan grabbed his arm, yanking him back. The vision blinked, then melted into darkness. The gap was gone, sealed tight with roots. "You didn't see it?" Perrin gasped, chest heaving. "No," Rowan said, his grip iron. "Whatever it wasn't real." Thistle's eyes darted around, sharp with understanding. "Illusions. The veil shows what we most long for, or fear." "Then we'd better keep our eyes sharp," Bramble growled. They pressed on, but the veil was relentless. Soon, it was Rowan who faltered. He froze mid-step, sword slipping from his hand. Perrin followed his gaze and saw a figure standing in the moss light. A tall man with proud shoulders, clad in armor dented and scarred. Rowan's father. "Son," the figure said, voice rough with pride. "You've done well. Come home." Rowan trembled, his usual fire dimmed, his eyes wet. He took one step forward. Thistle hissed and clapped her hands. A flare of green light erupted from her palm, and the figure dissolved into drifting moss spores. Rowan staggered, blinking hard, then cursed under his breath. "Thank you," he muttered, shame coloring his voice. "We'll look out for each other," Thistle said simply. For Bramble, the illusions took a crueler shape. They whispered his failures. Villagers laughing at his cowardice, children mocking his fear. He shoved his hands over his ears, muttering curses, until Perrin pressed the shard into his palm. The stone pulsed warm, steadying him. "They're lies," Perrin said. "Hold on to this." Bramble's breathing slowed, and for once, he nodded without argument. At last, the chamber narrowed into a tunnel of roots so tight they had to stoop. The light dimmed, leaving only faint glimmers from the moss and the shard's glow. Their steps echoed as if they walked through the belly of something ancient. Then they heard it, a sound deeper than drums, older than river or stone. A low, steady heartbeat that shook the roots around them. Thistle whispered, "That's no illusion." The tunnel opened into a hollow vast and circular, its ceiling lost in shadow. At the center rose a tree unlike any other. Its bark was silver, its leaves dark as midnight, its roots plunging into a pool of still water that reflected the glow like liquid glass. The heartbeat pulsed from its trunk, each thrum rattling through the ground. The heart of the vale, Thistle breathed, but they were not alone. From the shadows emerged shapes, tall, cloaked, their faces hidden. They moved silently, encircling the pool. Each carried a staff crowned with crystals that pulsed in time with the tree's heartbeat. One stepped forward, its voice both ancient and sorrowful. "Children of the outer woods, you carry the shard. You cross where few dare tread. But every gift has its cost. The veil does not open without sacrifice." The friends froze, the glow of the shard trembling in Perrin's hand. Sacrifice. The word hung heavy in the air as the leaves of the midnight tree rustled in a wind that was not there. The silence after the figure's words was so deep it pressed against their ears. Perrin felt his pulse stutter in time with the tree's heartbeat, the shard in his hand trembling harder with each thrum. Sacrifice. Rowan's voice was hard, defiant. "We've faced illusions and trickery. We've proven ourselves already. What more could you want?" The cloaked beings did not move. The one who had spoken lifted its staff, and the crystal at its tip flared with cold light. "Illusions prove nothing. They show only your weakness. But to step deeper into the forest, you must give of yourselves. The veil opens to none who cling too tightly to what they fear to lose." The pool before the midnight tree rippled, though no wind stirred. Images shimmered across its surface. Perrin's family gathered in their cottage, Rowan sparring in a sunny field, Thistle kneeling over a book of living runes, Bramble standing before a village crowd with their eyes full of scorn. Each picture twisted like a knife. Perrin swallowed hard. What kind of sacrifice? The cloaked figure tilted its head, unreadable. "That is yours to choose." Bramble spat, trying to mask his unease. "Convenient, isn't it? No instructions, no clear rules. Just give something up and hope it's enough." "Maybe that's the point," Thistle whispered. "It has to come from us." They stood in a loose circle, the weight of the moment pressing down. Rowan was first to step forward. He faced the pool, jaw tight, eyes burning. "If this is about holding too tightly, then I know what I must do." He unclasped the leather thong around his neck and lifted a small, dented crest, his father's old badge of command. He had worn it since boyhood, his one tether to a man he admired and resented in equal measure. "This doesn't rule me," Rowan said, voice trembling but steady. "Ido." With a hard breath, he dropped it into the pool. The water hissed as the crest sank, light flashing once before vanishing. The midnight tree shivered, its silver bark glowing faintly brighter. Rowan stepped back, chest heaving. Thistle came next, slower, more hesitant. She pulled from her satchel a sprig of dried elderflower bound in ribbon, a token her grandmother had pressed into her hands the day she left the village. For protection, her grandmother had said. It was the one piece of family she carried into every adventure. Tears pricked her eyes. "It's not that I want to lose it," she whispered, "but maybe I don't need it anymore." She placed the sprig gently on the water. It drifted a moment, then dissolved into motes of green light. The moss on the walls brightened, answering in kind. Bramble scowled, crossing his arms. "I don't need to play this game. I haven't got anything worth." He stopped abruptly. His hand went to his belt pouch. From it, he drew a wooden whistle, its surface worn smooth by years of use. Perrin had never seen it before. "My brother carved this," Bramble muttered, before the fever took him. "It's the only thing left of him." His voice cracked on the last word. The group fell silent. Even the cloaked beings seemed to lean closer. Bramble closed his eyes, jaw working, then hurled the whistle into the pool. It hit with a sharp sound that echoed like a sob. The water glowed deep amber for a moment, then stilled. Bramble turned away, shoulders hunched, fists tight. Perrin was last. His stomach twisted. He had nothing so tangible. No badge, no token, no crafted gift. Only the shard pulsed in his hand, glowing faintly with every beat of the midnight tree. "It has to be this," he whispered. Rowan's head snapped up. "Perrin, no. The shard." But Perrin stepped closer to the pool. "We've all carried pieces of our pasts. But this shard, it chose me, somehow. And if the veil asks for sacrifice, then maybe letting go of it is mine." He knelt at the water's edge. For a long moment, he hesitated, thumb brushing over the shard's cool surface. It had saved them, guided them, anchored Bramble's panic. Giving it up felt like tearing away his courage. But slowly, with shaking hands, he lowered it into the pool. The water blazed with silver light, flooding the cavern. The midnight tree's leaves rustled in a sound like applause. The heartbeat deepened, steady and strong, filling their bones. When the light dimmed, the shard was gone. The cloaked beings raised their staffs in unison. "The veil accepts. You may pass." With a thunderous crack, the roots behind the tree twisted apart, forming an archway into deeper shadow. Warm air spilled through, carrying scents of pine and wildflowers, a promise of lands beyond. Rowan turned to Perrin, eyes wide. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Perrin said softly, though his hand felt unbearably empty. For the first time, Bramble laid a hand on Perrin's shoulder. It was awkward, clumsy but solid. "Not bad, Mouse," he muttered. They gathered themselves and stepped toward the archway. Each carried the ache of what they had given up, but also a strange lightness. The veil had tested them, not with illusions this time, but with truth. As they crossed beneath the arch, the cloaked figures faded like mist, leaving only the midnight tree behind, its silver glow beating steadily in the hollow darkness. And then, with one final glance backward, the four friends stepped into the deeper forest, where no map could guide them, and no one knew what lay ahead. The air on the other side was unlike anything they had known. Sweet and sharp, like rain on stone, heavy with the scent of pine resin and flowers that glowed faintly in twilight colors. They stood on the lip of a vast valley. Rolling hills stretched out before them, carpeted in deep green and dotted with trees whose crowns shimmered faintly with golden fireflies. At the far edge, jagged mountains speared the horizon, their peaks wreathed in storms that flashed violet. But the most startling sight was the city. Half carved into the cliffs and half grown from colossal roots, it spiraled upward in tiers of stone and living wood. Towers shaped like fluted horns and domes of woven branches gleamed in the evening light. Bridges of crystal arched between them, catching beams of fading sun like prisms. Rowan let out a low whistle. "I've seen fortresses and castles, but nothing like this." Thistle's eyes were wide, her fingers twitching as though to sketch every detail. It's alive. The city itself is alive." Bramble, uncharacteristically quiet, muttered, "I don't like it. Places this pretty always hide sharp teeth." Before Perrin could answer, horns sounded from the valley below, long, resonant notes that rolled like thunder. Shapes emerged from the tree line, climbing toward the ridge where they stood. Elves, not the gentle, fair folk of campfire tales. These were warriors. Their cloaks shimmered with shifting colors, their armor forged from a blend of bark, bronze, and gleaming runes. Each bore a spear tipped with crystal that pulsed faintly, and their eyes, golden as autumn leaves, fixed on the intruders with unblinking intensity. The companions tensed, hands straying to weapons. One elf stepped forward, taller than the rest, hair braided with silver threads. He lifted a hand, palm outward. "Strangers beyond the veil," he said, his voice melodic yet edged with command. "Few have ever passed the heart, and fewer still have returned. Who are you, to trespass where none are meant to walk? Perrin's throat tightened. The absence of the shard in his hand ached like a missing limb. He swallowed. We didn't come to trespass. We came because the forest allowed us through. It asked us to give something up, and we did. We're searching. The elf studied them, unreadable. Behind him, his warriors shifted, ready to strike at a word. Rowan bristled, his voice low. Searching? Perrin, you make it sound like we're begging. But the leader's gaze lingered on Perrin, and something softened, just barely. The forest let you pass, which means it saw something in you. But its trials are not the end. They are the beginning. He lowered his hand. Gulme, the council must see you. Thistle whispered. Council? But dared not say more as the elves formed a circle around them, spears gleaming faintly. The companions exchanged wary glances but followed. Down into the valley they went, the city looming closer with every step, its lights flickering brighter as the sky deepened in a violet night. Perrin felt the weight of unseen eyes, the forest, the mountains, the stars themselves, watching. And though exhaustion pressed at his limbs, his heart beat faster with something else. Wonder. They had crossed the veil, and what awaited in this living city of stone and root was only the beginning of their greatest trial yet. The elven city was not entered through gates of iron or archways of stone, but through a living threshold. A titanic root arched upward, hollowed by time into a vaulted corridor. It glowed faintly from within, lines of bioluminescent moss tracing patterns like constellations. The air hummed as they passed, as though the root itself was aware of every step. Rowan whispered, "This place gives me shivers." Thistle clutched her satchel tighter. "No, it gives me hope. Look at it. No craftsman, no stonemason could shape something so perfect." They emerged into the city proper, and the sheer scale stole Perrin's breath. The streets wound in spirals, paved with stones veined with silver. Waterfalls tumbled from root to root, flowing into pools that reflected the crystal lights above. And everywhere, elves moved with quiet grace, their gazes sharp, their movements deliberate. The warriors led them to the city's heart, a vast hall woven of living branches, its ceiling open to the stars. In the center rose a table carved from a single slab of moonstone, around which sat the council. There were 7. A matriarch whose hair fell like silver waterfalls, her staff wound in vines that bloomed even in the dim light. A scarred warrior whose armor gleamed with embedded runes. A scholar with scrolls unrolling endlessly from his sleeves, his eyes ink-black with knowledge. Others whose presence radiated authority like a tide. The companions bowed awkwardly, each in their own way. Perrin dipped his head, Rowan crossed his arms stubbornly, Thistle bent low, and Bramble shuffled his feet with a grunt. The matriarch spoke first. "Children of the hill and hearth, you crossed the veil, surrendering what you hold dearest. Few of your kind have dared. Fewer still were chosen. Why do you come?" Perrin hesitated, feeling the weight of every golden gaze. "We don't know. Not fully. We felt the forest calling. We thought it was adventure, discovery. But there's more. There has to be." The scholar leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "And you surrendered a shard?" Perrin's chest tightened. "Yes." A ripple of whispers swept the council. The scarred warrior slammed a fist on the table. "Madness. To give up the shard is to unravel the weave. Do you not know what you've done?" Rowan bristled. "Hey, he didn't want to. The forest demanded it. What would you have us do? Turn back." The warrior rose, fury sparking in his eyes. But the matriarch lifted her staff, and silence fell. "Peace, Kalen. If the forest asked for it, then the forest knows why. It is not ours to question." Her eyes softened on Perrin. Long ago, the shards were scattered, gifts from the first flame. They held the songs of creation. To lose one is perilous. But for the forest to take it from you, perhaps it is not lost at all. Perhaps it is beginning anew. Thistle whispered under her breath. Beginning? The scholar nodded gravely. The weave has frayed for centuries. Shadows stir at the edges of the mountains. The stars shift in their paths. If the forest chose these children to cross the veil, it is because their thread is bound to what comes. A heavy pause followed. Then the scarred warrior spat. Bah, pretty words. They are untested, soft, and danger creeps closer by the hour. Scouts vanish at the eastern routes. Beasts twisted by hunger claw at our borders. If these outsiders are the answer, then we are already doomed. His words struck hard, even in Perrin's chest. Bramble muttered, "Finally, someone talking sense." But the matriarch only lifted her staff again. Flowers bloomed across its surface, releasing faint sparks. Enough. The council will decide. Until then, they stay. They learn, and they prepare. The companions were escorted to chambers within the living city, but the weight of the council's words clung to them like mist. Perrin paced the small room, the absence of the shard burning like a wound. Rowan sat sharpening his blade, muttering curses. Thistle scribbled furiously, her hands shaking. Bramble just sat against the wall, arms folded tight. "We wanted adventure," Perrin said finally. His voice cracked. "But this is bigger than us. What if we're not enough?" For once, Rowan didn't scoff. He looked up, blade glinting. "Then we become enough. Or we die trying." Outside, horns blew again. Not of welcome this time, but alarm. A low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. Far off, but growing closer. And Perrin knew, before the words reached them, before the warriors cried warning, that the shadow the council feared had arrived sooner than anyone thought. The horn blasts grew louder, rolling through the living corridors like thunder. Perrin froze as the floor trembled beneath him. A lantern swung wildly from a branch above, scattering fractured light across the room. Then came the roar, deep, guttural, filled with hunger and rage. It was unlike anything he had ever heard. It shook his bones, filled his stomach with ice. "Elves don't blow horns for deer," Rowan muttered, already buckling his sword belt. "Time to earn our keep." Bramble scowled, though his eyes betrayed the same fear Perrin felt. "I said this was madness from the start." But even as he spoke, he rose and hefted his axe. Thistle tucked her satchel close, whispering a trembling spell under her breath, the ink on her notes glowing faintly. The door burst open and an elven guard appeared, pale and breathless. The eastern roots are under assault. The council summons every hand, armed or unarmed. It matters not. They followed him into chaos. The once serene city now thrummed with urgency. Elves raced along bridges of woven vines, banners snapping in the unnatural wind. The waterfalls that once glittered with peace now churned with falling debris. And then Perrin saw them, the beasts. They spilled out of the mist like nightmares, shapes half-formed, half-familiar. Wolves with too many eyes, stags whose antlers writhed like serpents, hulking boars with molten cracks splitting their hides. Shadows clung to them like second skins, and wherever their claws struck, the very roots withered black. The scarred warrior Kalen was already on the front lines, his rune-carved blade flashing as he carved through twisted limbs. The matriarch stood behind, staff blazing with light, each strike sending vines lashing forward to ensnare the corrupted. Still, there were too many. "Perrin!" Rowan shouted. "Which way?" His mind screamed to run, to hide. But deep inside, he felt the shard, or rather, the absence of it like a guiding pull. He pointed toward the largest root arch, where the beasts poured in endless waves. "There! That's where the forest wants us." They charged. Rowan cut down a shadow stag that leapt across their path, his sword ringing with a sound almost alive. Thistle's trembling hands flared with light, runes sparking from her fingertips to bind a wolf in chains of ivy. Bramble roared and split a boar in two with one swing. his face twisted with a mixture of fear and defiance. Perrin? He had no blade, no staff, only the memory of the shard's warmth. He ran straight for the arch, his chest burning, and for a moment he thought he saw the faintest glow hidden deep within the twisted root. The beast noticed. A massive wolf, larger than a horse, its maw dripping with black flame, lunged at him. Rowan screamed his name, sprinting to intercept, but too far, too slow. Perrin threw out his hand instinctively, and the forest answered. Golden light burst from his palm, vines erupting from the soil to bind the beast mid-leap. The force knocked him backward, pain searing his chest, but the wolf was slammed into the earth, writhing under the roots. The shard wasn't gone. It lived within him. The matriarch's voice rang across the battlefield. He is chosen. Hope surged through the elves. Their blades gleamed brighter, their songs rose louder. And Perrin, dizzy but burning with new fire, pushed himself to his feet. Together, he shouted, and together they fought. Rowan and Bramble held the front, steel and rage and grit. Thistle's magic wove between them, mending wounds, sealing cracks in the ground before they split wider. Perrin focused on the root arch, pouring everything into the golden light that answered his will. Slowly, agonizingly, the corruption retreated. The beasts faltered, their forms unraveling like smoke. Finally, with a crack like thunder, the root itself blazed with light. The beast shrieked as though burned by the sun, scattering into mist, fleeing into the shadows from which they had come. Silence followed. The forest breathed again. The glow faded, and Perrin collapsed. When he awoke, he was surrounded by faces, Rowan scowling but relieved, Bramble pretending not to wipe his eyes, Thistle clutching his hand tightly, the matriarch watching with quiet pride. "You bound a shard to yourself," she said softly. "Dangerous, but it may be the only way. The forest has chosen, and we must honor it." Perrin swallowed hard. Then what happens now? The matriarch lifted her staff toward the distant mountains, their peaks veiled in shadow. "Now, child of hill and hearth, you prepare. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow, the real journey begins." And though fear lingered, Perrin felt something else stir stronger. Not the thirst for adventure that had driven him into the woods, but a deeper fire, the knowledge that they had faced the shadow and endured. For the first time, he believed they might truly be enough. And so, our friends take another step on their path, their laughter and courage carrying them forward into the unknown. Perhaps their story ends here tonight, but the forest still waits with countless mysteries to share. Thank you for joining me by the fireside. Until next time, may your days be filled with light, warmth, and just a little bit of wonder.